Introductory Algebra Homework Day 33. Starting out, we're going to factor a quadratic with a leading coefficient of 1. When they talk about a quadratic expression, they're talking about an expression with a squared term in it. So I'll see something like a z squared or an x squared. That'll be the highest exponent that you have. The leading coefficient of 1, if you remember, the leading coefficient is the number in front of your leading term. Since this is just a plain z squared, it's a 1z squared. So they say it's a leading coefficient of 1. If I want to factor that, I have to recall that when I do factoring, I'm trying to say what times what gave me this answer. And when I ended up with 3 terms, it came from foiling. So I know that I had to have my 2 sets of parentheses. So I'm going to start and I'm going to factor the first term. Factor first term, which in this case is the z squared. What times what gave me a z squared? Well, I would have had to have a z times a z as both of my first terms in order to get z squared. Z times z is z squared. The next thing you're going to do is figure out your signs. The way to figure out your signs is if the end is a positive, both signs have to be the same as the middle sign. If the end is a minus, you're going to have 1 plus and 1 minus. So the end sign came from multiplying the 2 end numbers together. If it's a negative, I have to have a positive times a negative. If it would be a positive, it either have to be a positive times a positive or a negative times a negative. So in this case, my end sign is negative. I know I'm going to have 1 plus and 1 minus. And then I just didn't leave myself enough room to factor the end number. Smush it down here. Factor the end number. So in this case, I have a 12. 12 is 1 times 12, 2 times 6, or 3 times 4. I want to find the pair of factors that when I end up foiling this out, I'm going to get a minus 11z in the middle. So if you look at the Alex explanation, they're going to have a whole bunch of stuff written there. But what you're looking at is if I add and subtract these numbers, which pair would give me a minus 11? If I happen to have a plus 1 and a minus 12, a positive 1 minus 12 is the minus 11 that's in the middle. I can always check these answers by foiling them back out to see if I get what I started with. Z times z is z squared. Z times my minus 12 is minus 12z. 1 times z is a positive 1z. 1 times a negative 12 is a minus 12. My middle term should add up to the middle here. Negative 12 plus 1 is the minus 11z in the middle. So that when I multiply this out, this is what I get for my answer. When you enter it in on the computer, you're going to enter in your factors. In parentheses, z plus 1 times z minus 12. Now this is one of these problems that I do them differently than on the Alex program. So I would suggest that either when you're on this problem, if you go to explain, if the explain wants to come up, nope, doesn't want to. It wants me to refresh the page. We'll try it again. That you go to Linda's note sheets. Otherwise, if you look at the top of your page at the name of it, it'll say IE27, factoring a quadratic with leading coefficient of 1. If you go under your resources, that's the other place you can get to Linda's note sheets, but you have to know what the numbering was, which you can tell by looking at the name of the topic. And then you'd have to scroll down and find it. IE27, there it is. And again, if you open that up, it will give Linda's notes and the steps that I did in order to figure out which pair is going to be, or which way I want to factor that. So this is one I would definitely probably print out my note sheets because it's going to be different than what Alex does. Let's go back to our paper here. So number 2, if I want to factor that, I look and say, oh, it's got 3 terms with a squared. I know it came from FOILing. Factor the z squared. Well, z times z gave me z squared. I'm then going to figure out my signs. The end sign is a positive. That means both of my signs had to be the same. So I look at the middle one. I had to have a positive times a positive. Then I'm going to factor my n number. My n number is 15. 1 times 15 or 3 times 5 is the only pair I'm going to have in order to get 15. I want the pair that's going to give me an 8 in the middle. So I look here, I'm going to add my 2 things together. Which pair adds up to 8? Well, the 3 and the 5 would add up to 8. And then, if I want, I can check. So I FOIL it out. Z times z is z squared. Z times 5 is a positive 5z. 3 times z is a positive 3z. 3 times 5 is a positive 15. The pair in the middle add up to the 8z in the middle of this expression. So z plus 3 times z plus 5 is going to be my answer. So my quick check is to say, okay, if I do a plus 3 and a plus 5, yep, that adds up to plus 8. Factoring the next one. Again, it's a trinomial, has 3 terms, has the squared, so I know it came from FOILing. Factors of the first term, y squared, y times y. My signs, this one again, the end is a negative, so I know one's a plus and one's a minus. Order doesn't matter, just so you've got one of each. I want my factors of 9. Could be 1 times 9, could be 3 times 3. I want the pair that when I plug them in, I get a plus 8. So if I want to get a plus 8, my bigger number has to be positive. If I do a 9 minus a 1, plus 9 minus 1, that should give me plus 8 in the middle. Again, we can always check these by FOILing. Y times y is y squared. Y times negative 1 is minus 1y. 9 times y is a positive 9y. 9 times a negative 1 minus 9. The pair in the middle, negative 1 plus 9, gives me the positive 8y, which is what I want in the middle of my expression there. So y plus 9 times y minus 1 is going to be my answer.